Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this very special episode of Data Exposed Live. Today, we are running an around-the-clock event, and this is our very first Data Exposed special. I'm so excited to be kicking this off with you today from whatever time zone, wherever you are in the world. Now, this around-the-clock event is around the clock with Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. And just a brief overview of this event if you haven't been in the loop on what's happening. What's happening is we've recruited a bunch of people from our engineering team to come and talk to you about various topics related to Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. Now, if you want to attend, you must register at aka.ms/aroundtheclock, and we'll throw that banner up for you. Maybe. Okay, so if you go to this link at the bottom, aka.ms/aroundtheclock, you'll be able to register for this event. We have almost 2,000 people, perhaps more than that by now, that have registered for this event, and we're really excited. We're going to have a kickoff session here on Learn TV, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're streaming from. And then we'll have an Ask the Expert session immediately following this on this stream as well. And then after that, we'll head into our Teams channel, which are only to folks who have registered. Please go register. It's free. We'll get you added so you can attend. I think we have at least 16 sessions as well as a hackathon across 2 different global time zones. So we're really excited to be here today. Thank you again for joining us today. And today we're going to start by kicking it off with this keynote. So it's really exciting to be able to kick off the keynote. We have 2 principal group program managers joining us today for this keynote. They are Sanjay Mishra from the Azure SQL side and Wee Hyung Tuk from the Azure Data Factory side. We also have an exciting demo by Davide Mauri for later in the episode, so you'll want to be sure to stay tuned. Now, with all this being said, I am going to pass it off to Wee Hyung to talk a little bit more about why we're doing this together and get started with the keynote. Wee Hyung, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Anna. So we got everyone together from the Azure SQL team as well as the Azure Data Factory team, right, to present this learning event. And one of the main reasons is like, here you see some of the really fun facts about Azure Data Factory and the Azure SQL family. One is that today, out of the box, we provide really rich set of connectors that's deeply integrated with the Azure SQL family. But more importantly, when we look at the stats over the years, Sanjay and I was having this discussion, the data sources from Azure SQL families are among one of the top sources and sinks that's been used in ADF. And the other fun fact is really that Azure Data Factory move petabytes of data globally, and many of this data that got moved, right, are from the Azure SQL family. And for many of the SSIS fans out there, and I used to work on the SSIS team as well, you realize that SSIS on ADF just works. But more importantly, over the years, we have been striving to continuously push the envelope on what you can do with SSIS on ADF. And more importantly, how you can leverage data stores from the Azure SQL family, right, to be able to run the SSIS package store or to store data from the SSIS package store, and many, many more. And throughout this whole session, we hope to be able to share with you many of this. Now, before we get started, we just want to thank the SQL community as well as the Azure Data Factory family, because without you, Azure SQL and many of the products in the Azure SQL family would not be possible, right? And so over the holidays, right, we asked many of you in the community to share about one thing that made your day. And thanks a lot for sharing. And we are always very excited and also inspired, right, by how you're using Azure SQL and anything in the Azure SQL family, as well as Azure Data Factory. Now, to bring all this together, I just want to share, this is one of the many customer win stories that we see almost every day. And here what you'll see is that using Azure SQL Managed Instance and Azure Data Factory, MCS, right, has come together to build a really powerful solution for delivering healthcare information that customers need. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sanjay, who's going to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Hong. Very excited to be here. Everybody in the SQL community, thank you for joining. ADF and SQL are the two most mature services in Azure, and no wonder they touch a lot of customers, they touch a lot of data, and they touch a lot of lives together. So what I'm going to present to you today is what's happening in the world in terms of technology adoption. As you can see, from 600 years back to now, as and when new technologies have come up, how much time it has come for those technology to be adopted widely. And you can see uh, over the years, whether it is printing press or a car or an operating system or internet to cell phone to cloud company to IoT devices, every new technology that come up, the adoptions have been super fast. In recent years, IoT devices and IoT workloads have been very prevalent everywhere, from your own house to the factories to your car. We cannot escape these devices anymore. They're all over the place, and they have adopted been so prevalently all over the place. Not just that, they're everywhere. They emit data at an extremely high rate. I'm going to give an example to show you. This is one example of an IoT workload at scale. This IoT workload is inserting 4 million rows per second. You can imagine how how heavy these are on data. Why these are heavy on data? Because data is the new electricity, data is the new air, data is the new oxygen. No business can run without data, and we need to make sure this data comes to your most appropriate data store. At the same time, this is being analyzed, this is giving you the value for your business. And we will go through a few things. What makes this data usable? Our goal is to make data usable, as simple as that. Data is everywhere. Now you have to make it usable. We have provided the best SQL Server platform on Azure. Whether you would love to use infrastructure as a service or the platform as a service, we have choices for you. You can use virtual machines on Azure to run SQL Server of your choice version, your choice of operating system, or you could rely us to manage your platform, and then we give you a platform as a service. If you want a whole instance, we give you Azure SQL managed instance. If you need a single database, we give you Azure SQL database. And now there is various options too. You can pack a bunch of databases in an elastic pool. You can make your databases serverless, and then so on. However, SQL is something that has been there for a long time. Year 2020 was a very strange year, but it was also the year of 50 years completion of this breakthrough paper. This is a picture of father of relational databases, Professor Cod. And if you have not looked at his paper in a while, or probably have not had a chance to look at, sincerely encourage you for all of you to take a look at the paper. This is the breakthrough paper that made relational databases successful. And this research completed 50 years in 2020. Now, relational databases has not only been a good research area, they've also been very successful in commercial world too. This was written in early 90s by Jim Gray, and he had said, okay, at that time it was 14 billion database industry. Now it is probably 4 times or 5 times more than that. And not only relational databases have grown, they've grown into every possible walk of life. So this success is actually tremendously reflected not only in on-premises world, but also reflected in the cloud world. 10 or 11 years back, we took the first step to make a cloud relational database. We took SQL Server, which is the base engine, but we provided a platform as a service in the form of what the code name we used to call them at the time was a Cloud DB in 2009. And you will not believe, at that time, each database could be only 10 gigabytes. Over 10 years period of time, till 2019, and now we are growing that even more, is that in 10 years time we have made a database size 10,000 times possible, from 10 gig in 2009 to 100 terabytes in 2019. At every couple of years, we have brought in breakthrough technology to Azure SQL database to give you the kind of scale you need, the kind of performance you need, the kind of manageability that you need. For example, we came up 2020, we increased to 50. In 2011, 2012 time, we introduced something called Sterling that completely changed the way the databases are managed in the backend, completely changed the kind of features and capabilities are supported in Azure SQL database. And we started growing. In 2015, we introduced the code name of the project was Malmo. Some of you may remember, and we call it Elastic Pools. Now you can pack hundreds of databases in a pool and do a shared resource management there. We didn't stop there. In 2019, we introduced something called Socrates or Hyperscale that can take the database to 100 terabytes. I'll in a little bit, a little while, I'll talk more details about it, why we did that design. And then we also introduced serverless. Serverless databases can auto scale, auto pause, auto resume, taking the burden off your plate to manage the scale of the database, or even to the database goes to sleep. That means you don't get charged for the compute. This has enabled us to cater to all types of applications that a relational database can be useful, whether it is your IoT application, whether it is your gaming application, whether it is your line of the business, retail e-commerce application, whether it is a healthcare application, any type of application we have seen, SQL database has been everywhere. Now, let's talk a bit about what the present and what the future of these databases look like. What we did is we took a SQL database, whether it is running in on-prem or running in a VM or running in the cloud in a PaaS mode, is a relational database always contained within the boundaries of whether it is a container or a VM or a physical machine. So that's what you can see. The buffer pool, the data files, transaction log, TempDB, and all components are within the boundaries of whatever compute we have given. The compute could be a physical machine, it could be a VM, or it could be a container. What we did was that we see that no matter what you do, the shape and size and capability of this database is restricted by how much you throw into it, how much power you throw into that container where it is running. So we decided, let's try to think cloud. In cloud, the design patterns are that you decouple things, you break things apart, you break things into microservices and manage them independently. If applications are doing that, so we did in the backend for the database as well. What we did was that we brought the data files out of there and put it in Azure storage. But when you take out data files out of your computer and put it in Azure storage, you're creating a potential performance gap. Some applications may need that, okay, I need much better performance than a remote Azure storage data files can provide me, especially for the IO performance. So to compensate for that, what we did that we introduced a concept called page server. A page server is nothing but a set of machines with the entire database loaded in a local SSD cache on those machines. If your database is 100 terabytes, these page servers always 100% cache those 100 terabytes. That means you will never have to go to actual Azure storage. Azure storage is only for durability purpose. And now, because this SSD cache, the communication between your compute and this is super fast, so you do not lose performance. We also see that for a database, the boundary of a transaction or the capability of how much data you can process in a given time is always get constrained by the transaction log. How about we take that out too? So we took transaction log out to another microservice called log service. And this log service gives us opportunity to scale it independently. Now we can scale data independently. We can store not just the data that you could store within your compute node, but hundreds of terabytes of data. You can also scale log independently. And now that we free up some space in your compute because we moved the data file and transaction log that was occupying, we introduced something called resilient buffer pool extension. This is nothing but an extension of the buffer pool, as the name suggests, and it caches data from the page server for even faster access. So the data that is being served by your buffer pool, if you don't find it in buffer pool, you go to RBPX data cache. If it is not there, you go to this cache, which means that there are multi-layer of cache hierarchy giving you the best possible performance for any type of workload you put on this system. What we also provided was that you are right now you could use only one compute node. We say, okay, have this is Azure storage. Then what we put physically, this is how it looks like. Azure storage, and these are page servers on again some compute nodes. And then we put log service. This is how the log service is designed internally. And then the compute node is a compressed version of the full picture. We give you a primary compute for read write, and then we give you multiple secondary nodes for read-only purpose, which means you can scale your read workload as well. When put together, it looks like this. All this put together provides you a cloud-born database architecture that provides you independent scaling of storage and compute. And that means that whether you are expanding on your transaction volume, whether you are expanding on storage volume, or whether you're doing bunch of bulk load, you have a limitless database service at your hand. We provide you 0 to 4 secondary replicas. These replicas not only help you for scaling read, they also are high availability replicas. That means you can fail over to them if the time needs. Backup and restore are done using database snaps, or sorry, the storage level snapshots, which allows much faster backup, much faster response. These are not size of data operations anymore. So that's is what we are doing, is that who's using this? Now that we have put together such a awesome database service, who's using it? Thousands of customers using it at various scales. But I want to give an example of one customer who is this actual data from customer. Actually, they are an IoT workload where data is coming in and being loaded into hyperscale and then queried. And you can see, sorry, I don't have this formatted because I have the screen capture from the actual system. This is actually more than a trillion rows, 1.6 trillion rows in a single table. And when we run query on the table, the response time is sub-second. So we are able to run a huge database with huge tables, 1.6 trillion rows, on which we are doing a subsequent sub-second query response. This is all possible because look who is bringing in data to SQL Hyperscale. It is ADF. So this is a story of ADF and Hyperscale working together in a way. ADF is pumping data into Hyperscale, and these query are running on SQL Azure SQL database Hyperscale to give you the very best performance on an unlimited size of your database. Over to you, Young. Thank you.
Now it's super exciting to see how ADF and Azure SQL came together, right, to load trillions of rows right into a database. But more importantly, seeing all the exciting innovations that happen in the Azure SQL family over the past many years is really exciting. Now I'm going to right now move on to the next part of the keynote, which is really to share about Azure Data Factory and what we've been doing so far. Now, Azure Data Factory, in many of these customer conversations or during MVP discussions or even presentations like this, we share about the modern data warehouse pattern. Now, and in this modern data warehouse pattern, you bring data, right, whether it's on premises, whether it's a cloud data that comes from multi-cloud, or whether it comes from SaaS systems. We would provide you with very rich set of connectors to load them into Azure, but more importantly, be able to unlock and leverage everything that's on Azure for you to prepare, to transform, to predict, or even to enrich the data with a goal to reduce the time to insight. The ability for you to then serve this data, right, whether it's using Azure Synapse Analytics or Azure SQL, and many of the other favorite stores that you might have on Azure, right, so that it can provide you with the insight and very rich kind of powerful visualization in Power BI. And at the same time, as part of this modern data warehouse pattern, we've seen customers, right, building this and instantiating different variations of this, right, where data gets stored in an Azure Data Lake storage Gen 2. And of course, Data Factory takes care of this whole orchestration. Now, Azure Data Factory is really not just hybrid data integration simplified. It's really, really powerful enterprise data integration tool. And often when we talk about Azure Data Factory, we look at 4 pillars. One is we really want to make it easy for you to get started, whether you are an early ETL developer or whether you're someone that's been really expert and seasoned and has been building data pipelines over the years. We want to make it easy for you in a code-free environment. But more importantly, if you have already invested in SSIS, we want to make it easy for you to be able to just rehost SSIS in Azure Data Factory in a few clicks. And to complete all of this, right, CI/CD data ops is top of everyone's mind. And so we have also built in support to either Azure DevOps or GitHub repository. But more importantly, it's important that we keep this cost low. And so you pay as you go, the infrastructure gets spin up as and when you need it, and we'll spin it down, and you only pay for the time it's spent either moving the data or transforming the data. And whether you're moving megabytes of data, gigabytes of data, terabytes of data, we want to make it easy for you where the infrastructure will just scale elastically on demand. And of course, out of the box, which I'm going to get to later, is we provide a rich set of powerful connectors, right, to various data stores. And more importantly, we have really deep integration with Azure SQL and everything in the Azure SQL family. And last piece, which is really important, is many times people ask us, well, are you infusing AI into the product? What can we do and what is happening underneath the hood? And so underneath the hood, Azure Data Factory, in order to be able to understand when you need the infrastructure so that you don't wait a long time for the infrastructure to be spin up, or how do you want to move data? What should be the right configuration of the machine that helps you move the data, right? Every single day, right, we have models, right, that is looking at all of this and to ensure that you have the best experience. But most importantly, we integrate with Azure Machine Learning, and therefore any machine learning models that you build in Azure Machine Learning, right, you will be able to run them, and you'll be able to run them and connect it with the rest of the data flow. Now, this slide just shows you some of the concepts that you might get used to. If you're new to Azure Data Factory, as you learn Azure Data Factory, you'll get to understand what is a trigger, which helps you start the pipeline. Now, in a pipeline, you could have activities, and we also provide very rich iteration construct, if you will, so that you can apply loops, or you could iterate through collections and do or process the data. And the other concept that will come really common to you as you get to work with Azure Data Factory is this whole notion of an integration runtime. If you have data that's sitting on premises in a virtual network like a VNet, right, you could install a self-hosted integration runtime in order to have line of sight to this data. And if you're on Azure, right, and if you're connecting to any of these Azure data sources, or you're trying to run with any of these Azure compute engines, if you will, we provide an Azure integration runtime where we will manage it for you, and we will also intelligently help you auto-resolve it to the right location that will give you optimal performance. Now, Azure Data Factory allows you to do data ingestion and movement at global scale. And what you see here is whether it's from tuning of the copy performance to us doing just-in-time compute scalability, but more importantly, using AI, right, to be able to be intelligent, but auto-select what are the integration runtime resources that can be used. We do this just like magic. But most importantly is while you are designing the pipeline, when you are determining how to move your data, we provide very intelligent hints, right, that give you insights into what is the ingestion and movement performance, but more importantly, give you very deep statistics on the timing breakdown, right, including how much it will cost you, so that then, as you design the pipeline, you'll be able to keep this in mind. Now, just to share with everyone, 2020 was really an exciting year. It was a challenging year, but it was also a very exciting year. And kudos to the Azure Data Factory engineering team, whether it's from ingestion to data preparation and transformation, to even improving authoring and monitoring experience that will delight you when you work with Azure Data Factory every day. We continuously innovate, but continuously to keep you right in mind and making sure that we are providing you and addressing the feedback that you provide to us, which we are very grateful for. Now, I talked about connecting all your enterprise data. Now, right now, out of the box, we do provide a huge set of connectors. But more importantly, this number of connectors continue to grow. And we're continuously thinking how we can then work with the ecosystem in order to bring you even more connectivity. So this rich set of connectors, whether you're connecting to on-premises data, you're connecting to data sources in different clouds, whether it's Azure or any of the other clouds, or even SaaS system, as you see in this really short demo, right? These connectors are organized really easy for you to find, but more importantly, it enables you deep integration to each of these stores in order to bring you to the data and to be able to move them at scale. Now, the other experience that we've been working with the community on, and this has GA'd for I think 24 months now, is the ability to transform data code-free and using a serverless infrastructure. We call this mapping data flow. And therefore, using ADF Studio, you could design your data pipeline and you focus on the logic on how do you want to transform the data. And underneath the hood, we will compile it, right, to code that will run in a Spark cluster. But more importantly, for any kind of data transformation, it is important to provide you with a powerful set of transformation, whether you're doing data cleansing, whether you're doing transformation, or whether you're just getting a derived column or doing aggregation or conversion and more. Out of the box, these are all available to you that allows you to build really powerful pipelines that is used in many of the production deployments today. And more importantly, we continue to push the state of art in orchestration, giving you richer control flow, but data flow capabilities out of the box. Now, many a times we hear feedback that besides doing it code-free, where you could drag and drop your source and your transform and your sync, you might have already written code in one of your favorite language that is running in one of your favorite compute engines, whether it's Azure Databricks, Azure HD Insight, to running code, that's sitting in a stored procedure, whether it's Azure SQL, Synapse. Out of the box, we connect to this, and it enables you to leverage your favorite code or language and run this on your favorite compute, all orchestrated using Azure Data Factory. And Azure Data Factory provides deep integration with many of these compute engines on Azure. Now, the other thing that comes into mind, and many of the times we ask is, I want to move data, but I also want to make sure that this data movement is secure, right? And more importantly, I want to make sure that data never leaves my virtual network. I want to be able to connect to many of this storage or Azure SQL, using managed endpoint or private endpoints. And so out of the box, we provide you with a managed virtual network capability that takes the complexity out of setting all this up, And when you alter your Azure Data Factory data pipelines, you are able to configure this very easily, and that allows you to move data securely, but at the same time prevent data exfiltration. Now, the other thing that's really super exciting is many of times in many of demos, conferences, or customer discussion, we get a lot of feedback to say, well, we see all these things that you have done, whether it is doing a type 2 SCD or being able to copy data from SAP BW to Azure, or being able to copy data from on-premises SQL Server to Azure SQL, and all this. It looks like magic. Can we do the same magic that you do? And so out of the box, in Azure Data Factory today, we provide you with a set of pre-built templates. These pre-built templates are super powerful, but it's also very important that it's going to help you jumpstart your data integration project, And we continuously work with the community as well as with many of our partners to grow all these pre-built templates so that you can get started very easily. Now, the other thing is something that we just announced earlier this year is we used to have this wrangling data flow in Data Factory. Now, we rename it, but more importantly, the rename is significant to us because we want to reach out to all the Power Query developers who love the Power Query experience, but at the same time also works with your peer who wants to be able to use Azure Data Factory for all your data integration needs, And therefore, Power Query with ADF is right now in public preview, and it enables you to do visual data preparation, but more importantly, data wrangling using your favorite tool, which is Power Query, and run this in Azure Data Factory with all the other Azure Data Factory capabilities that are available. Now, the last piece I wanted to cover is this whole notion of, I could have SSIS packages, but more importantly, I have significant investment in SSIS over the years. Can I use Azure Data Factory to do it? And therefore, it's super exciting, and many of you are aware of this now, is that we do allow you to use SSIS with Azure Data Factory out of the box. But more importantly, even if you use any of the custom SSI components, we continuously work with you to strive to improve the ability to install custom components for SSIS and run it at scale in Data Factory. And it also provides you with significant cost benefits. And so with that, I just wanted to share that, today we're really excited when Sanjay and I, Anna, Marisa, we came together to think about this event probably about 6 months ago. It was with one thing in mind, which is Azure SQL and everything in the Azure SQL family, plus Azure Data Factory. We want to make sure that we have the best delightful experience that will enable you to build all your productions pipeline and store it in production data store. Whether it's being more powerful together, more tightly coupled together, but continuously strive to weave in more of this magic and intelligence to enable you to be able to do your task better, faster, and more cost effective. So with that in mind, I'm going to switch over to the demo, and I'm going to invite Davida, who's going to show you how ADF and Azure SQL comes together really nicely in a really powerful demo that I was really excited when Davida showed me about a month ago. To you, Davida.
Yeah, thank you, Yong. Yeah, absolutely. So let me show you how powerful is Azure Data Factory and Azure SQL together. So you mentioned several interesting words like magic, I took notice. So like, a great user experience. So I was thinking when we were discussing the demo, how I can actually show it. To show some of the magic we do behind the scene. So I started thinking about a very common, requirement, like importing a text file, a flat file. It's very common, right? But we know that if you have to import a CSV, everything is almost easy. But if you start to import something a little bit more complex with a header, and then with the columns, and then with non-standard field separators, I wouldn't say that this is complex, but definitely will take some time to make sure that everything is correctly set and put in place, right? And of course, in 2021, we would assume that, we talk about AI and, intelligence, that the computer could do this for us instead of, having us going and selecting all the correct option. So let me show you how you can actually do this very easily. So let's say that we want to load our customer. So let's call our pipeline load customers, and we are using the copy data tool. So I'm creating my task name, and of course I need to select my file. And my file that, again, is this file here with this strange header and non-standard field separators is sitting already in my Azure Blob Store. So let me just create a new connection here because I need to select a source. So I will use Azure Blob Storage, continue. My blob account is called DM Store 2. So let me just give it this name. And then here I will select my personal subscription. So here we go. And then I'm going to select my storage account. And that's it. So I already connected the ADF to my storage account. Of course, now I need to select the file. So next, I want to go and select the file. So it's in this folder and ADF demo. And then let's start using this file that I just showed. And remember that as the file has all this kind of strange header and line feed. Okay, let me select this and click next. And now behind the scene, ADF is using a framework called the PROS that basically is using what we call automatic generation of program from input and output examples. As you can see here, it comes from Microsoft Research that automatically figured out everything. I literally, as you saw, because this is live, I didn't have to specify anything. It automatically figured out the column delimiter, the row delimiter, the fact that the first row has header, and that even some of the first row actually need to be discarded because they were just, header, not part of the data. So this is like magic, like as you said before. So we can move next. And now I want to select the destination. So again, let me create a new connection because I want to store data into Azure SQL, where I have already prepared, or I already have a table. So let me go to my Azure SQL. My database is called the import sample database. And then I will select our subscription. Here we go. And then my server is this one, the MS SQL Server, and the database is import sample. Nice. Now I just have to specify a user. Now I could also connect to Azure Key Vault or use integrated security, but then I just go for the easy way right now to make it as fast as possible, since I just have a few minutes for this demo, and put a login and password, and that's it. Connected. Okay, let me create the connection now, and this is selected, so I can move next. And now I just have to map my file to my table. I will use existing table, and I just want to import everything into customer table. Nice. Let's do next. It will automatically help me to do the mapping. Right now, the mapping is very easy. First column with first column on the table and so on. And all I want to do is just make sure in this case that I clean the table before loading all the data in it. So I can also provide a pre-copy script. Next. Done. Now, as you said before, here I have a clear explanation of the cost I will be charged and everything I need to know. And in this case, I just go next. Next again, this is the summary of what will happen and what will be created. And then this is validating my pipeline and creating the pipeline and deploying it for me. And then it will start to run it. I can now switch. So pipeline is running. I can now switch to monitor. And that will show that the pipeline is running. And in a few seconds here, everything will be imported. Very nice. So I can click here, and actually I can go to the Management Studio here. And if I select the table, you see now that my table is absolutely full of data. But that's not usually enough, right? In a full ATL or ELT pipeline, because after that I want to do something. So in my case. What I want to do now is go to the pipeline that, as you saw, I created with a wizard, but now it's fully editable. So I just want to, first of all, call this load customers. And what I want to do is actually send a notification to, let's say, my phone when all the table is loaded. So I will go and use the lookup transform activity here, where I say, okay, after having loaded the customer, please run the lookup, and my lookup will be called actually count loaded customer. And what this lookup will actually do is just execute a query on my destination dataset that will simply count how many customer I loaded in this, let's say, a hypothetical staging table. Okay, so that's everything I need to run, and actually, if I preview data, I will have the query executed, and I see it's working. Now, the interesting part, you mentioned that ADF has a lot of connectors. So what I want to do is use something called web task or activity, where I can say, yeah, let's say that I want to connect to something that will allow me to, do something in the material world when I receive this data. For example, I want to call an if this then that application that I have created so that I can receive a notification on my phone. Well, to do that, I already created my if this then that application. So all I have to do, let's call this here call, actually notify. And what I have to do is just specify the URL I want to use. This URL is provided to me by if this then that. I know that I have to issue a post command, and the content must be something that is a JSON that contains a property called value1, whose value is actually taken from the result of the previous activity. So here what I'm saying is that, dear ADF, please insert in this position the value of the loaded customer, which is the output of my previous query, into this position. Now, if everything has been done correctly, I can just go on debug. Of course, this will start. So load customer will start. Then it will execute the query, and then it will send a notification to the if this then that service, and I will receive a notification on my phone, and that should happen anytime now. Okay, waiting for the web to be activity to be executed, and in a few seconds I will receive the notification. And here we go. So as you can see, the first notification is from if this then that. That is notifying me that I have loaded in just a few seconds 150,000 customers. And this is pretty good because and pretty easy, as you see, because I literally wrote almost no code, just a few queries. Everything has been set up live in, I guess, less than 10 minutes. And this allows me to get, data loaded, some query executed, and even some REST service called when I need it. I think this is pretty good, and it really fits in the description of magic that we use to define, when we use ADF and Azure SQL together. With that, the last thing I want to underline here and highlight here, and then I will be over to you, is that many customers say, okay, yeah, a flat file is good, but I also have a zip file. Can I also load a zip file without having, to decompress, store it into a storage? Absolutely, yes. In the source, I can just go in my file, and then instead of selecting a table file, I can select a zip file that I, of course, have already prepared, which is just the zipped file that I showed before. And then here, select zip, and that's it. I can just now publish all again. And from now on, instead of loading from my flat file that, it's a little bit bigger than the zip file, I can just use the zip file again, without no code changes, without no worries. It will just work. So I can run this again and it will just work. So that's honestly truly amazing, I would say. And with that, in the meantime, I will receive another notification. Over to you, Wee-Young.
Thank you, Davide. From being able to ingest and connect to so many data sources, loading them into Azure SQL, doing the count, and more importantly, being able to send a notification, right, is just super powerful and it's really like magic. And thank you, Davide, for showing us this really action-packed demo, if you will, right, in such a short time. Now, before I hand it over back to Anna, I just want to share with you, like, whether you're learning Azure SQL or Azure Data Factory, today on Azure Learn, we provide you with a huge set of resources that enable you to get started. And so what I'm showing you here is your journey to ADF success, if you will, right, where we break it down from week 1 to week 4, how you can start with the basics and all the way to be able to do many of these magical capabilities that we showed to you today. And then, of course, as you build up your confidence and your knowledge in both Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory, there is many Microsoft certifications that's available. And here I'm showing an example of one of them, which is the Data Engineer Associate Certification, right? That will then enable you to get certified and get the professional certification. Now, how do I get started with Azure Data Factory? These are some of the links. Many of the PMs across the Azure teams, right? We stream to the YouTube channel. And so it's aka.ms, ADF videos. And there you always get the latest and greatest of things that you need to know about Azure Data Factory and the continuous innovation that we continue to make day after day. And so with that, I hand it back to Anna.
Thanks, Wee-Young. This has been a really great session so far, and it really just excites me because we saw how powerful Azure SQL is, how we're really building on this cloud infrastructure to re-architect SQL for the cloud for services like Azure SQL Hyperscale. And then you talked to us about Azure Data Factory and how we've also kind of re-innovated or innovated at scale to bring things like serverless capabilities to what traditionally on-prem was definitely not serverless. And then Davide came on to show us a really cool demo, even how you can set up these things to send things like notifications, which is something I had never seen before. So Wee-Young, thank you. And, just for our viewers, a little context, like Wee-Young mentioned earlier, about 3 to 5 months ago, I can't remember how long at this point, Wee-Young reached out and we all chatted and said, yeah, Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory are better together. So let's do this event and let's bring everyone together. Let's do a hackathon. Let's get with the community. And that's why we wanted to do it all on Teams so that we can interact with you all and kind of work towards this community of Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. So Wee-Young, thank you. And, let's take a look at the next 24 hours. So again, and I know I've mentioned this a few times at this point, but if you want to be added to our Teams channel, you must register at aka.ms/aroundtheclock. So feel free, if you haven't registered yet, there's still time. We'll still add you so you can attend the rest of the sessions that are part of this event. And let's just take a look at what we're going to do in the next 24 hours. So what I have up on this screen is our registration page. So when you go to that around the clock URL, this is what you're going to see. Okay, so you're going to see that this is a free event. We had a countdown, but of course it's happening now. And you can see some things on our agenda. So right now we're in our keynote or kickoff, and then immediately following this on the same stream, so you don't need to close your browser, don't have to go anywhere yet. On the same stream, we're going to continue with an Ask the Expert session. You can see we've got some awesome experts lined up from both the Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory teams, where you can ask your questions live and get those questions answered. After that, we're going to switch over to Teams live events. So once you join, again, you'll get a link to join our Teams channel with about 2,000 other folks, and you can join all these sessions. Our sessions are short. We're going to have breaks, but we're going to cover lots of topics related to performance, security, and availability of Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. It's going to be really fun. And as we round out the Pacific time zone, or your US time zone event, what we're going to do is we're going to have a hackathon kickoff. So you'll be introduced to what the hackathon is and how to participate and potentially get your answer or your hackathon submitted. And now after that, we'll do another Ask the Expert, this time in our APAC time zone. So we're going to do that in SGT time, I believe at 9 a.m. And then we'll continue with another set of sessions related to Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. So it's going to be a really exciting 24 hours. We're really looking forward to it. You know, it's going to be maybe a long day, but it's going to be a fun day filled with all sorts of interesting product announcements and interaction. So, you know, after this event, or if you miss some of these sessions, you will be able to catch all of the sessions, including the session that's going on right now, at aka.ms/Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory and ADF. So basically what we've done is we've put together a set of episodes of Data Exposed or videos from Azure Data Factory's YouTube, and we put them in one playlist for you. But what you'll see after this event is we're going to add all of the new sessions to this playlist. So this can kind of be your one-stop shop for getting videos related to Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. Now we have a little bit of time left before our Ask the Experts session. So I'm going to bring back up our keynote speakers, and we're going to do a little bit of Q&A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the questions. And this first question, and I know we shared a resource to learn more about it, but I thought this was a great question. So let me find that question. Here is that first question. So hopefully you all can see this question on the screen. And Sanjay, I think you had an interesting response to this question. So can you share some insights on this? Can gathering data from mobile handsets and putting into Azure be considered IoT?
Absolutely. IoT, Internet of Things. Anything that can capture data and send data forward can be considered a thing in this context. And if you see, the mobile devices are the mostly used things. It's in everybody's hand. And whether it is tracking your how many walks you took in a day, or where did you travel or not, or anything, your emails, your communication. So all these things are happening on your mobile phone, and they are being sent to some cloud somewhere. And all it depends on is not just IoT is not just about collecting the data, but what you do with the data. Put the data in a data store where you can actually analyze the data, get value out of the data for your business. So that makes the whole package of things. Data collection is one part, but data analysis to give you business value is the other part of it. So yeah, if it is a thing, it is an Internet of Things.
Awesome. Thanks, Sanjay. Davide, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I know you've done some really cool samples with Azure SQL and IoT and probably Azure Data Factory as well. Can you share some comments or tips or cool facts on things you've done there?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, around the IoT, you can literally do many things. So one thing I will be showing later and is, for example, how we can get data from a real-time the public transportation that is available here in Seattle, but there is, this feature. It's available all around the world. Many cities provide real-time transportation data, so you can literally see where each bus in your city is. And of course, that is basically a stream of JSON data. And we just learned that we can actually call, but we can also receive data from REST endpoint with ADF. So what we can do, for example, is ingest the data, extract the latitude and longitude, save it in Azure SQL, use Azure SQL capabilities to manipulate geospatial data to save it in a way that can be projected on a map, so you can see on Bing Maps or any other maps you want to use, the position of your bus. And I used it to create a solution that worked for me, so I can always be notified, and I was really using if this and that, when I have to leave the office, when we were used to go back to the office to work, and leave it to go and catch the bus and go home. So yeah, that's a way. And basically, you can do it almost without writing code, which is amazing. In like an hour, you can do that, but less, I would say. So that's something really amazing, I would say. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Davide. And yeah, I agree. I actually just set that sample up myself yesterday, so it's a lot of fun, and I won't be missing any buses either.
Yeah.
This next question, it came more at the beginning of the stream, and it's a question I don't actually think I know the full answer to. So I'd be curious. I know, Sanjay, you pointed Josh to a white paper to read, but can you give us like a sneak peek on what actually, why it's called a relational database?
Absolutely, my favorite question. So it's important we understand why it is called relational databases. They have been successful for over 50 years. They have been very successful on premises. They have been very successful in the cloud too. The reason behind this success is a strong mathematical foundation that defined this technology. The key word here is a relation. In mathematics, relation is another word for set. All the operations that happens in this in a relational database happens in a set. Whether you are selecting something, the data set is a set, and then you're selecting something, you also result in a set. You may be selecting one column or one row, that's also a set defined. And there is a strong foundation known as relational algebra and relational calculus, which has been the foundational research to make this technology strong and successful. So that's what makes it called relational database, because the logic behind the technology behind this is actually relation. Relation is another word for set. If you remember that way, you'll be able to kind of comprehend that better. I strongly encourage everybody to go read the paper. Honestly, when I first time read the paper, I did not understand more than 10%, and it's okay. It's okay. The more you read it, more you understand. Even today, I can understand barely 50% of it, which is okay. Then you read other books written by CZ Date and EF Cord and a lot of other people. Then you understand it a bit more. But that paper is a very comprehensive paper, very concisely written. It's worth every second you spend on it. It is whatever you want to call it, whatever religion you believe in, whatever faith you believe in. It is the seminal, decisive, groundbreaking thing that made relational database happen. A lot of us owe our career to that paper. We would not be doing this if that paper did not exist. Many of you would not have the job that you do today if that paper did not exist. So treat that paper like the most important thing that has shaped our career. So please read it. You'll find it very useful.
Awesome. Thanks, Sanjay. The last question I have for our keynote speakers today is from True, and they say, has anyone tried the new Power Query on Azure Data Factory, which is still in preview? Is it expensive? And maybe some tips on how you can optimize costs or understand the pricing there. Weihang, is that something you can help us with?
Yep. So Power Query, so early on, before this January 2021, when you create a data flow, we call it a ranking data flow. And so we rename it as Power Query just about 1 or 2 weeks ago. Right now it's in public preview, meaning everyone can try it in your Azure subscription. It is not expensive, right? And by expensive, it's relative as well, right? As we shared earlier during the presentation, it is really about a serverless infrastructure. And therefore, as and when you design your Power Query, you're actually in Azure Data Factory Studio, if you will, you're actually using Power Query online, right? And then when you run it, you want to be able to run this on a serverless infrastructure that will manage and will spin it up for you. And it really depends on what kind of infrastructure do you choose, right? Whether it's compute optimized, whether it is memory optimized, or just a general purpose compute infrastructure. And of course, today using the Azure pricing calculator, you can actually estimate and get a sense of how much it will cost you to run that. And so definitely, hopefully, this would get you to get started with Power Query on Azure Data Factory. And more importantly, any feedback that comes, just send it to us. We'd love to work with you to shape this to the best experience. As it's still in preview, right, there will still be the rough edges that we need to smooth out. And so we definitely love to work with you, right, to continuously improve it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Weehong. And, as we close out this segment, which is the keynote for the Around the Clock with Azure Data Factory and Azure SQL event, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. And I know there are some sessions that some of you are involved in throughout the rest of the day, so I'm going to encourage everyone to go check those out. But for now, thanks to you all for joining us, and I'm going to hop to our next segment. So let me pull everyone out. And yeah, so welcome if you've been with us for the past hour or so. We're so glad that you've chosen to join us on your morning or afternoon or night or whatever time it is where you are. And we are joining today for a Data Exposed special called Around the Clock with Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. Now, if you want to be a part of this event outside this Ask the Expert session, which we are about to start, then I encourage you to go to aka.ms/aroundtheclock, and there you can register for our Teams channel, which is where we'll be hosting all of our sessions after this upcoming one. So that URL is on the page now, on the screen now, so you can go there, register. We have over 2,000 people registered, so we're really excited for a fun, interactive day full of lots of sessions. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears a bit and move into the Ask the Expert session. Now, during this session, I'm going to be bringing on subject matter experts from both the Azure SQL and the Azure Data Factory teams to answer whatever questions it is that you might have live, kind of on the spot. It's going to be fun, exciting, maybe a little exhilarating, maybe a little stressful, maybe some follow-ups. We'll see what happens, but I'm looking forward to it. I always learn a lot during these Ask the Expert sessions, and we have some really great experts here with us. Now, from wherever you're streaming today, whether it's Learn TV, Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter, if you have a question, go ahead and ask it now or whenever you think of it, and I'll get it queued up to ask our experts. And with that being said, I'm going to bring some of our experts on. I'm going to bring them on one by one and let them introduce themselves so that you have a bit of a better idea of who's here and what types of questions you might want to ask them. So the first person I'm going to bring back up is Weehong, who's going to be helping me with this. Weehong, thanks for joining us. For those of our viewers that might have missed the earlier segment we just had, which would be a bummer, but for those that did, can you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Weehong. I'm part of the Azure Data Factory team as a group program manager. And so I lead the team of PMs that's continuously working really hard, and kudos to the team every single day, right, on trying to make sure that all this customer feedback that comes to Azure Data Factory, we're continuously thinking about them, but more importantly, how can we innovate and push the envelope, right? And my background was that I used to be part of the exercise team. I spent a couple of years on the AI platform team, driving AI innovation and strategy. And more importantly, having seen both data and AI, which is intricately linked together, is super exciting, right? To now be able to have a chance, right? And it's with gratitude to be able to contribute to the progress of Azure Data Factory.
Awesome, thanks. We're excited to have you back after such a long time of not seeing you. Okay, the next person I'm going to bring up is Bob Ward. Bob, thanks for joining us. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everyone, for joining. What a cool, amazing event. I'm just honored to be part of the Ask the Experts today. I'm Bob Ward. I'm a principal architect in the Azure Data team. For a lot of you who've seen me before, that sounds weird. Aren't you a SQL Server guy? SQL Server is part of Microsoft Azure Data. And I spent a lot of time working on SQL Server, whether it's containers, Linux, you name it. But Anna, over the last year, and of course, you've been one of my partners in crime, I spent a lot of time on Azure SQL. So really excited today to share some information with our audience about Azure SQL, especially for those who are trying to translate that knowledge from SQL Server. So great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Great to have you. The next person I'm going to bring up is Mark Cromer. And Mark was actually on Data Exposed just a few weeks ago. So Mark, thanks for joining us again. Can you give folks a little summary of what it is that you work on these days?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So welcome, everybody. So yeah, I am Mark Cromer. I'm a program manager on the Azure Data Factory team. So I focus on data transformation and pretty much any area within Data Factory that I can help with here today. I'm happy to do that. I've been here with Microsoft, helping to bring products to market for over 10 years now, going on 11 years, and been in this data space, in the ETL space for many years than I'd like to mention. But it's sort of a passion of mine, something that I love to do and talk about. So I think that I'm happy to kind of answer any questions and help out today. And it's an honor to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. The next person I'm going to bring up is Aditya. So Aditya, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do? And again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Anna. Love to be part of this. My name is Aditya. I'm a program manager, and where I'm dealing with the SQL Server running on Azure IaaS. So yeah, I will be more than happy to answer and any questions and tell you guys that Azure is the best place to run your SQL Server in any kind of way. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Aditya. Next, we have Mohan. So what you guys can see is there's a trend. We have a lot of experts here today with us. So Mohan, I'm bringing you on. Thanks for joining us. Same question to you. Can you tell us a little more about what you do and yeah.
Thanks, Anna. I'm Mohan Sankaran, and happy to be part of the expert panel. I'm the group engineering manager leading the engineering team for ADF. It consists of the UX which you use, right? The usability part which we deal with on getting to the code-free aspect of building the ETL, right? And the orchestration and the data flow, as Mark was talking about. It's been an awesome journey since we launched V2. I'm super excited to understand how it is working and what we could do to improve things, right? From my background, I've been in the ETL space for quite a long time with Microsoft since the beginning of ADF journey, right? And also with Informatica for a long time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mohan. And last but certainly not least, I'm also going to ask all of our experts if you could just turn your volume down if you're not using a headset. I'm just getting a little bit of an echo. But last but not least, I'm going to bring on a data exposed frequenter. That's a word I just made up. And that is Silvano. Hey, Silvano, thanks for joining us. How's it going today?
Hi, Anna. How are you? Doing good here, and I'm glad to be part of the show here. My name is Silvano Coriani. I'm a program manager in the Azure SQL team. I'm working on a lot of customers in adopting Azure SQL technologies in their solutions. And I'm also working on some specific features, like, for example, Elastic Query in the Azure SQL database protocol.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Silvano. Okay, so that's our experts. So we have lots of wonderful experts here. I'm going to ask the experts that if you see a question or I announce a question that you want to help with, if you give me a little wave, then I'll know that you want to answer. And this first question, this is a really great one. I'm not sure if someone from the SQL or ADF team is going to want to take this one on, but let me just show it up. This one comes from actually a friend of mine, Eve Party, and she says, I would like to hear about how data quality validation could be done after or during ingesting data with ADF from SQL. what is the best practice for using these tools? So lot in there. Is there any specific SME that wants to take a first stab at this one?
Do you actually want a literal hand wave, Anna?
There you go.
Okay, I'll do that. So I'll start on this one. So this is kind of an area that we focus on within Data Factory is how to be able to provide data quality. Now, data quality is a little bit of an overloaded term, as is almost anything in our industry, but just to specifically talk for a second about data cleansing. Okay, so data quality is a fairly wide area of practice within data and data transformation and data ingestion. And we have some things that we're doing in Azure around that overall complete data quality picture from Azure Purview up to Data Factory, and then of course landing that data in your data store, in this case Azure SQL database. But some of the things that we have there and that we're doing, and the way that we explain this is that when you ingest data within, and you're using Data Factory to do that, we have the data flow capability that is the code-free data transformation within Data Factory. Those of you coming from an SSIS background are probably familiar with that. You've heard terms like control flow and data flow in the past. Within Data Factory, the analogies are pipeline and data flow. So we used at least the same term in that case. In that case, then you're going to want to do things like you're going to be able to do some fuzzy lookups. You're going to be able to do some joins, and you can also be able to do some things that cleanse that data. So the fuzzy lookups allow you to combine data that's in the lake that is similar but not exact. And then, so that gets you past some of the common things that you'll see where you might find data that is slightly misspelled or similar but not exact. And then you can do, once you do that kind of fuzzy lookup and you get those things combined, then you can do some cleaning on that data. And so the cleaning is going to happen within Data Factory's data flows, where you're going to be able to use the data transformation functions in there to do some things like trim data, be able to concat data, remove bad characters or characters you don't want in there, and then sort of normalize that and conform it to a model. That's all possible in Data Factory and data flows. The piece that is in addition to that, when I think of data quality, I also think about the data coming in, classifying that data within your catalog, or what is now known as Azure Purview, and that gives you a richer picture of that. So that's a set of features that's coming to life into market in the next coming months within Purview. But the actual cleansing of that data then is something that you'll do in Data Factory. And I would look at data flows as a way to do that. There's lots of other pieces, by the way, and bit parts throughout the Azure Data Platform that will let you do that. When you're in SQL database, of course, then you'll run your stored procs and your SQL code to also perform some data cleansing on that data, which of course you can orchestrate from a Data Factory pipeline as well. Anyway, I'm going to just leave it at that. If anybody else has anything else they want to add to that, I think that's pretty much my take on how to use Data Factory there.
I think, let me add a quick comment on it. I think Mark is right on that, right? So the Purview is the area where we are. If you have a lake, or if you have a lot of data sources in the SQL, right? You want to pull in all the data. You want to understand what is in there, and you want to assess the quality of the data. You may want to put some specific rules in there, right? My large customer should have been spending greater than X amount of dollars, right? So these rules will be applied, and you'll get a scorecard on top of it, right? And what's good data, what is bad data, you'll get a scorecard on that. And after that, what Mark said is, if you want to correct it, go use the data flows, right? The code-free authoring or the coding mode to correct it.
Good point, Mohan. And the other thing I want to say to that is that, something else kind of triggered in my mind when you were talking, is that those rules, those business rules that you make to essentially look for quality issues in your data, including metadata. So looking at the whether or not the columns are correct or the columns are mismatched from where they were before. That's all in Data Factory as well, in the data flows piece. And the other thing, okay, I'll stop with this one, I promise, last comment, is that we also have brought to market Power Query within Data Factory as well, for being able to quickly analyze, explore, and then prep your data, which is very important in a data quality process as well. Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
I can go on for
Mark.
days on so I'm not going to do that.
That's all good. Thanks so much. We have another question from someone from the community, Catherine. Catherine asks, what is your #1 tip for ADF developers to improve performance and reduce costs when reading from and writing to Azure SQL databases? Okay, this is a great question. This is a question I think Silvano actually might have a session on. So Silvano, I'm going to pass to you.
Yeah, and that is correct. Actually, later today or tomorrow morning, actually, my time, I'm going to have a dedicated session on how to optimize ADF pipelines when you are using Azure SQL database as a sink or as a source. So I kind of encourage you to take a look at the session tomorrow to get more. But overall, I mean, ADF is like any other client application for Azure SQL database, right? So all the best practices that we have when we are interacting with Azure SQL are still valid here. Making sure that you are reading or writing the data that you need and not more than that, right? So selecting from a column perspective and from a row perspective only the data that you have to move, and from a writing into SQL, making sure that you have the right compute size and to basically hold on the amount of data that you want to load, right? So all compute sizes in Azure SQL have a ingestion rate limit from a transaction log perspective. So you can take a look at the limits and make sure that you are using the exact compute sizing that is needed to make sure that you can insert into Azure SQL the amount of data in the amount of time that you need. Other than that, again, making sure that you have the right set of indexes, or actually you eliminate or pause the indexes on Azure SQL side to make sure that you're not spending too many Azure SQL resources while you are ingesting data into the database engine. So those are kind of a rule of thumbs, but again, you will get more if you follow my session tomorrow.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Silvano. I think Weehang, you also had some stuff to add.
Oh, yes. So to add on to what Silvano said, from the Azure Data Factory docs, if you will, right, we do provide performance tuning guides. And this covers both copy as well as data flow. But more importantly, those guides are generalized from many of the large-scale customer interactions that we had. And hopefully that will help you get towards improving your performance. So that's one. Two is, as you design your data pipelines, right, and you're looking at doing different kinds of data movement or ingestion, right, from different sources and sync to different things, if you will, we also provide a performance tuning right where it is that will give you more guidance into, how should you tune your DIU, or how should the amount of parallelism that you should use, and so on and so forth. And so that is definitely something that you should watch out for. And then I think the third thing, just to also close on this topic or this question, which is an amazing question, is that between the Azure Data Factory team and the Azure SQL team, we continually strive to push the last bits out from a pipe that is moving data, right? And anything that we can squeeze out of the pipe would be amazing. And of course, the pricing calculator would always be there, right, to help you estimate your initial cost. But at the same time, I think it's end-to-end, right? You have to know how to manage your costs on the Azure Data Factory front, but you also need to manage your costs on the Azure SQL front as well. And maybe Bob would also have some thoughts, right, on how could you manage costs on the Azure SQL database.
Yeah, thanks, Weehang. Yeah, and just in light of what Catherine was asking about, just making sure you manage overall costs for Azure SQL, as you know, it's subscription-based, different than SQL Server. All sorts of different choices. In fact, in my session on slows, we'll talk about how to make some of those right choices. So usually it comes down to things like using our vCore model with our different service tiers for Azure SQL database. And so one consideration, if you've got existing SQL Server licenses, is the ability to use something called Azure Hybrid Benefit, where you can take your licenses from SQL Server and there's a calculation to apply each core license to a certain number of vCores that you might use with, say, Azure SQL Database or Azure VM or even Managed Instance. So one thing for sure is to take a look at, can I use existing licenses to save cost in the cloud? The other thing is just to make sure you're scaling your application correctly. You may even consider using something like serverless, where you can auto scale and only pay for the cores you need. Core storage is kind of a separate thing you pay for, but usually it turns around when people look at cores as something they're trying to get charged for. So serverless is a really interesting option to, again, pay for what you need, even have the ability to pause your compute and not pay for any compute charges when the database is completely idle.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bob, Silvano, and Weehang. That was a great answer or set of answers. And thanks, Catherine, for that great question. We have a lot of questions coming in, so we're going to move right along. This next question comes from Jason. He says, how can we access on-prem FTP server files from ADF? Also, how to trigger a pipeline when the file arrives in the on-prem FTP server? Wee-hyung, okay.
Sure. So in order for us to have the line of sight to on-premise FTP server, right, you'll need to use the self-hosted integration runtime. And then you have to then copy the data, right, from on-premise, right, to a storage like ADL Gen 2, if you will. And then once that happens, one of the things that we have out of the box in Azure Data Factory is event triggers. And event trigger can react to blob created or blob deleted event when files arrive on the ADL Gen 2, for example. And so then with that, and you piece that whole solution together, right, you'll be able to move data from on-premises to a storage in Azure. Now, once the data gets inserted into the storage on Azure, you will fire off a blob created event. You should then be able to filter out, what kind of blob or file path patterns that you want to watch out for. And then that will then allow you to trigger a pipeline.
Awesome. Thanks, Wee-hyung. This next question, I'm not exactly sure if we're referring here to Azure Data Factory or Azure SQL Database, but this is about complex types like JSON, and it's asking why aren't null values persisted in the output? Silvano, do you think this question is related to Azure SQL Database? And if so, do you have any insights?
I think that's actually ADF, right?
Mark, I saw some hand moving. Do you have any insights on this one? You're on mute.
Hey, that was a test to see if you could actually read my lips. That's what I was saying. And, did it work?
We failed.
Sorry, okay, we failed. Yeah, my apologies. That is actually a data flow syntax from Data Factory. And so, can I take some of these? Is it possible to actually sort of chat offline with any of the folks on here? Because I think that this one is one that we have to probably get fairly in depth with in terms of shredding JSON and data flows.
Yep, no worries. We will instruct you on the private chat on how to answer with chat.
Okay, great.
Okay, we're gonna keep moving along. We have this question from Martin who says, could you please tell us more about the Azure Data Factory templates? Is Microsoft working on building up a library of these? Will you maintain them? And will you be able to use an updated version of the template?
Yeah. So today, if you use the Azure Data Factory Studio, if you will, which is the UX that you use to build your pipelines, you can get started with ADF templates, right? And this ADF templates is essentially, when you design a pipeline and you parameterize it well, right, it allows you to then select the templates that you want, connect to the source, connect to the sink if you want, right? And then the templates, whether it's a data flow, whether it's a copy activity or a web activity, or even the cool demo that Davida was showing you earlier, and it just gets instantiated, both the pipelines, the data set, and so on and so forth, and everything gets connected together. So this templates out of the box, we continue to grow the set of templates. And today, if you fire up Azure Data Factory and you click Author and Monitor, you actually see these templates already there. All these templates are provided by Microsoft employees, if you will. And we definitely have been looking at how can we enable both the community as well as the partner ecosystem to contribute templates as well. And so definitely fire us a mail offline where we could share with you some of this thinking, which is still in very early stages. And right now, those templates that's out of the box, Microsoft do maintain them. But at the same time, many a times nothing is perfect. And so if you encounter any issues with the template, right, you could also send us an email and we'll work with you, right, to fix it. Now, can you use the updater of the template? Once the template gets instantiated in your design environment, you can make modification to it. And using Azure Data Factory Studio, you could save them as your templates that only you have access to. And of course, then you can continue to make modifications to it. We're definitely working together, right, on how you could also contribute template. In fact, the hackathon briefing that comes at the end of the day in Pacific time, one of the hackathon founders, if you will, or hackathons PM owner, if you will, right? It's going to share with you some of these exciting things where we're working with the community in almost a 2 weeks long hackathon, so that you could also contribute templates as well, and working with you on how to showcase this in Azure Data Factory. Back to you, Anna.
Awesome. Thanks, Wee-Hung. This next question, this is a really great question, I think. And this question is, which Azure model is best to use with Azure Data Factory? Is it DTU based or vCore based? And for this one, I'm going to ask Silvano. Silvano, do you have any insights on this?
Yeah, as you know, we are supporting both kind of purchasing models in Azure SQL, the DTU based or vCores. I would say that if you don't know, if you have no idea in terms of an existing, for example, on-prem system to compare with, for in terms of number of cores that you may already have in a data transformation process and so on, DTU is probably the simplest way to go, because you can again pick up the or increase or reduce the number of DTUs in your instance and see if the performance level that you're looking for is there. Instead, if you already have an existing system, for example, SQL Server running on premises, and you know that you're using a given amount of core, with vCore, you can have a better kind of comparison between the existing system and the new system in Azure. That's kind of, other than that, there are no real kind of differences.
Hey, Silvano, let me just add on a little bit. One thing to keep in mind, though, we just talked about it some, is, and you mentioned, I think it's a great way to describe if you're existing SQL Server, not SQL Server. But if you do have a company that has licenses, right, for SQL Server, the Azure Hybrid Benefit only applies to the vCore model, because we translate the number of cores you get to the number of vCores you get. The other thing that I've kind of seen a little bit, I just find a little more granularity to looking at things like my billing of my compute versus storage, more details from a resource limit perspective. So for ADF, I can imagine transaction log rates might be an issue for you or a consideration. So we kind of highlight out more specifically what that looks like. And then, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, Silvano, but I don't know, if you want to do something like serverless, for example, you need to go to, say, a vCore model to get those kind of type options.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob and Silvano. We're going to move right along. We have a little less than 10 minutes left, and we probably have 30 questions. So we're going to try to get to as many as we can, and those we don't get to, we'll be sure to answer on our YouTube channel. This next question says, is there any use case of Azure Data Factory except migrating data to Azure? Can you please explain what else we can do using Azure Data Factory? ADF folks, any one of you in particular want to take that one? Oh, okay. Wee-Hung? Oh, you're on mute.
I was learning from Mark. So I think Azure Data Factory definitely allows you to then be able to migrate data, say from your on-prem SQL Server, right, to Azure SQL, for example. But Azure Data Factory is an enterprise data integration tool that allows you to do both ETL, ELT, right? And to build all sorts of pipelines that will enable you to move data, but not only move data, but transform data to the right shape before landing it in a target store. And so today, what we've seen a lot of people using Azure Data Factory for, besides doing that migration, right, is also the ability for you to instantiate the modern data warehouse architecture that I was showing you earlier, where data lands in a lake, right? You want to do processing at scale using, for example, a Spark-based infrastructure on data that's in the lake. But more importantly, loading them into a target store like Azure SQL or Azure Synapse Analytics. We're also working with a lot of ISVs or independent software vendors that simply use Azure Data Factory as the underlying pipelines that powers their products and experiences. Now, in those situations, you do not see Azure Data Factory being mentioned at all. But a lot of the key products that's out there today, whether it is in the financial space, whether it's in the healthcare space, energy space, and so on and so forth, many of them underneath the hood, right, has been using Azure Data Factory to not just move data, but transform the data and getting it into the right shape for the respective business units that require them, right? And of course, other than that, Data Factory is also deeply integrated into Synapse Analytics as well. And so today, if you're using Synapse Analytics, for example, and you start the Synapse pipeline and data flow, underneath the hood is the same infrastructure that power Azure Data Factory that allows you to move those data and transform those data at an amazing scale. Back to you, Anna. And maybe Mohan, you want to add something?
Yeah, the one additional thing I would add is you typically need, for any warehousing project, you got a lot of data which comes from different systems, right? So you want to do customer analytics, you need marketing data, sales data, clickstream data, all that stuff. As Vishang was mentioning, data integration is the path in which you combine them, join them, right? Shape them before you can answer questions, analytical questions on the data, right? By loading into the SQL family.
Awesome. Thanks, Mohan. All right, we're going to continue to move along. This next question is related to SAS keys in Azure Data Factory. So the question is, can we use SAS keys in Azure Data Factory to write to ADLS Gen 2 instead of using account key of the storage? Now, this might be a really specific question that we have to look into and respond on chat, but any takers on that one?
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
Yeah, for that, I think we'll probably respond in the chat. But before we answer it offline, today, for example, when writing to storage, not just with account key, we do support a rich set of authentication mechanism. And then specifically on how you're using SAS key, we'll definitely work with you offline, right, to answer that question. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, there's a lot of really specific questions in here. Let's see where we want to go. Okay, here's another question. Again, I'm not sure, Silvano, if you have insights here, but the question is from Robin. Can you talk more about Elastic Query and any improvements specific to performance?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We are working on a set of improvements for Elastic Query, and specifically around performance and stability. As you know, Elastic Query is still in preview, and we are working to GA the feature by the end of this semester, so around kind of summertime. And part of these improvements, we are basically implementing a brand new backend and engine, which is based on technologies that are available, for example, in Synapse SQL serverless pools. And this is going to improve significantly performance and stability of the Elastic Query SQL. And after that, we are also working on enabling some networking scenarios. So having, for example, Elastic Query target and source databases behind private links and firewalls. So those are the kind of improvements we are looking for in the next semester.
Awesome. Thanks, Silvano. We have just a few minutes left. I think I have time for one or two more questions. Let's see. This next question is, let me just put it up there. This question is interesting to me. It says, how do we do the custom coding in ADF like we do the VB script in SSIS? So Weehyung, maybe we'll start with you and then Mark can chime in.
Yeah, sure. So in SSIS, of course, you could use the script task or script component. And in fact, when I was on the SSIS team, we spent a lot of time working with customers on debugging and making sure that you're able to write your script task and script component well. Now, in Azure Data Factory, we don't have a script task and script component, right? But if you're using this in your SSIS package, the SSIS package continues to run and get rehosted in Azure Data Factory. But what we do support in Azure Data Factory is deep integration with, for example, Azure Functions, right? Or if you're trying to write Python script and you want it to run it on a Databricks cluster, or you have .NET code that you want to run on an Azure Batch cluster, Azure Data Factory has activities out of the box that allows you to then call code that's happened, whether it's an Azure function or code that's running a Databricks cluster and so on and so forth, right? And that's our at least thinking around custom coding in Azure Data Factory that allows you to expand the possibility with Azure Data Factory. Now, whether we're going to have a similar kind of script kind of experience in Azure Data Factory, right now out of the box, we don't have it, but we definitely love to hear from the community. And feel free to tweet, feel free to send us an email or in private chat. What are your thoughts around that? And so then we can then help evolve and continuously improve Azure Data Factory. And I'll hand over to Mark on whether he has any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much that's make sure I'm not muted. I'm not muted. That was pretty much exactly what I would say too. Is that essentially you're going to either use the custom activity within Data Factory, which is then going to run Azure Batch, or like Wihong said, is run your Python scripts on Databricks. The really common thing these days is to write the code in Azure Functions and use that within your pipeline, which gets a pretty similar experience to what you have in SSIS today. But yeah, always please give us the full feedback in terms of how you would use that. It'd be very interesting to know.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark and Wihong, and everyone for your awesome answers and the awesome questions we got from our viewers. Viewers, I know there are a lot of questions that we didn't get to answer. We are at time, so what we'll do is we'll spend some time making sure we get your answers in the YouTube chat, so please stay tuned and we'll get those in. I also wanted to mention that we'll be running another Ask the Expert session with some other wonderful folks from the Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory teams at 8 p.m. Pacific. So that's in about 10 hours or somewhere around 10 hours from now. So if you want to come back and try to get some more airtime, that would be a great time to join. I also wanted to remind you all that the event is not over just because the kickoff and Ask the Expert session is over. If you go to aka.ms/around-the-clock, you can register to join over 2,000 participants in 16 more sessions that are going to dive deeper into these topics and also give you another forum to get your questions answered. So I definitely recommend you join us there. And to all of our wonderful experts, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to have you all here and answer these questions. And, we hope to see you next time on Data Exposed, and we hope to see you later in our event Around the Clock with Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. That's it for now, and thanks, folks, and we hope to see you next time on Data Exposed.
Thank you.